Eleanor Sutton pressed her dead husband's pistol against her own temple and whispered, "Forgive me, Lord." 8 months of whispers. 8 months of accusations. 8 months of her children crying themselves to sleep while the town called their mother a murderer. She couldn't do this anymore. Then her 11-year-old son burst through the cabin door, snow in his hair, terror in his eyes. "Mama, there's a man dying by the creek. Wolves are circling him. Mama, please, he's still breathing." Eleanor lowered the gun, and everything changed. If you want to know what happened next, subscribe to our channel and stay until the very end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. The pistol was still warm in Eleanor's hand when Tommy's voice cut through the silence. She shoved it into her apron pocket, her heart slamming against her ribs. Her son stood in the doorway, 11 years old, chest heaving, snow melting in his brown hair. "Mama, did you hear me? There's a man—" "I heard you." Eleanor's voice came out steady. She was good at that. 16 years of marriage to Henry Sutton had taught her to hide everything. "Where?" "Down by Miller's Creek. Rose saw him first. She's still there, Mama. I told her to stay hidden in the trees, but—" Eleanor was already moving. She grabbed her Winchester from above the fireplace and threw on her coat. "How many wolves?" "3, maybe 4. They're just waiting." "Show me." They ran through the snow together, boots crunching through ice that had crusted overnight. December in Montana territory was a beast with teeth. The cold didn't just bite, it swallowed you whole. Tommy led her past the barn, past the frozen vegetable garden, down the slope toward the creek, where cottonwood trees stood like skeletons against the gray sky. "There." Tommy pointed. "See him." Eleanor saw. A man lay crumpled against a fallen log, half buried in a snowdrift. His clothes were thin torn, soaked through with something dark. Blood, she realized. The snow around him was stained red. 30 yards beyond, 4 gray shapes paced in the timber. Wolves. Patient. Hungry. "Rose," Eleanor called. "Rose, where are you?" A small voice answered from behind a tree. "Here, Mama." "Stay there. Don't move." Eleanor raised the Winchester and fired twice into the air. The shots echoed across the valley like thunder rolling. The wolves scattered, disappearing into the pines like smoke. She approached the man slowly, rifle ready. He could be anyone. A drifter, a thief, an outlaw running from the law. Henry used to warn her about men like this, though Henry himself had been far more dangerous than any stranger. The man didn't move. Eleanor knelt beside him and pressed 2 fingers to his neck. Pulse. Weak, but there. His lips were blue, his skin gray-white with frostbite. He wore a threadbare coat, boots with holes in the soles, no gloves. Whoever he was, he owned nothing. His eyes fluttered open. For one moment he looked at her. Really looked. His eyes were brown, deep brown, filled with pain and something else. Resignation. Like he'd already accepted death and was surprised to find it wearing a woman's face. "Leave me," he whispered. His voice cracked like breaking ice. "Not worth saving." "That's not your decision to make." Eleanor looked over her shoulder. "Tommy, help me get him up." "Mama, we can't just—" "Now, Thomas!" Tommy ran to her side. Together, they hauled the stranger upright. He was heavier than he looked, dead weight against their shoulders. Rose emerged from hiding her 7-year-old face, pale with fear. "Mama, who is he?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Run ahead and open the cabin door. Get blankets by the fire." Rose ran. They half-carried, half-dragged the man up the slope. He tried to walk, his legs buckling with every step. Blood dripped from somewhere beneath his coat, leaving a trail in the white snow. "You're hurt bad," Eleanor said. "What happened to you?" The man's jaw tightened. "Trouble." "What kind of trouble?" He didn't answer. They reached the cabin as the sky began to spit fresh snow. Rose had the door open, blankets piled by the hearth. The fire crackled warm and bright. "Set him in the chair," Eleanor ordered. "Tommy, get more wood. Rose, heat water." The children obeyed. Eleanor eased the stranger into the chair by the fire and knelt to examine him. His coat was stuck to his side with dried blood. When she peeled it back, she found a wound deep jagged, still seeping. "Knife?" she asked. "Bullet," he said through clenched teeth. "Went through. Week ago maybe. Lost track." "A week and you've been walking on this?" "Didn't have much choice." Eleanor studied his face. Strong jaw, weathered skin lines around his eyes that spoke of hard years. A scar ran along his right forearm. His left hand was missing the smallest finger. "What's your name?" He hesitated. "Caleb. Caleb Brennan." "I'm Eleanor Sutton. This is my land, my home." She paused. "My children." Caleb's eyes moved to Tommy, who stood by the door with an armful of firewood watching with barely concealed suspicion. Then to Rose, who clutched her rag doll and peeked from behind the kitchen table. "I'll leave soon as I can stand," Caleb said. "Don't want to bring trouble to your door." "You already have." Eleanor stood and moved to the stove. "But you'll die if you go back out there. I didn't drag you through the snow just to watch you freeze on my porch." She poured hot water into a basin and returned with clean rags. "This is going to hurt." "Most things do." Eleanor cleaned the wound. Caleb didn't cry out, didn't even flinch. He gripped the arm of the chair until his knuckles went white, but he made no sound. When she'd done what she could, she bandaged him tight and sat back on her heels. "You need rest. Days of it, maybe weeks. You try to leave before you're healed, you'll collapse before you reach the road." Caleb looked at her. "Why help me? You don't know what I am." "I know what you are right now. A dying man in my house. Out here, that's all that matters." Tommy stepped forward, his young face hard. "Mama, can I talk to you? Alone?" Eleanor followed her son to the far corner of the cabin near the frost-covered window. Tommy kept his voice low but fierce. "We can't keep him here. What if he's dangerous? What if he's an outlaw? Pa always said—" "Your father said a lot of things." Eleanor's voice was flat. "Most of them were lies." Tommy flinched. Eleanor softened. She touched her son's cheek, feeling the first hint of stubble there. "When had he started growing up? I know you're scared. I am too. But I watched your father ride off drunk and never come back. Found him 3 days later in the ravine, frozen solid. Nobody helped him. Nobody cared." She swallowed. "I won't let another man die alone. Not if I can stop it." Tommy glanced back at Caleb, who had closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling him under. "What if the town finds out they already hate us?" "Let them hate. They've been doing it for 8 months. One more reason won't change anything." That night, Eleanor made a bed of blankets on the floor near the fire. Caleb slept fitfully, mumbling words she couldn't understand. Names, maybe. Places. Once he said clearly, "Should have let them kill me." She sat by the window long after the children went to bed, watching the snow fall and thinking about the gun still hidden in her apron pocket. 3 days ago, she'd written a letter to her sister in Boston, explaining everything, apologizing, asking her to take the children when Eleanor was gone. Now a stranger lay dying in her home, and something had shifted inside her. A door she'd been ready to close had cracked open again. She didn't know if that was hope or just another form of foolishness. Caleb woke on the second morning to the smell of bacon frying. For a long moment he didn't know where he was. Then memory returned the woman, the children, the fire, and he tried to sit up. Pain exploded through his side. He gasped and fell back. "Easy." Eleanor appeared beside him, pressing a hand to his shoulder. "You're not ready to move yet." "How long have I been out?" "Day and a half. Fever broke this morning. That's good." Caleb looked around the cabin. Carved furniture, glass windows, a piano in the corner covered with a cloth. This was a wealthy home. Or it had been once. The curtains were faded, the rugs worn thin, and he could see places where expensive items had been removed, shadows on the walls where paintings once hung. "Your husband," he said. "Where is he?" Eleanor's face went still. "Dead. 8 months. I'm sorry." "Don't be." She turned back to the stove. "He wasn't worth grieving." Caleb said nothing. He understood about marriages that were prisons. His own mother had lived in one until the day she died. The boy Tommy came down from the loft and fixed Caleb with a hard stare. "You're awake." "Seems so." "How'd you get shot?" "Thomas?" Eleanor warned. "It's a fair question, Mama. Man shows up bleeding on our land, we got a right to know why." Caleb met the boy's gaze. 11 years old, maybe 12, with eyes too old for his face. He'd seen something, this kid, something that stole his childhood. "I was riding with some men," Caleb said carefully. "They wanted to rob a stage. I refused. They didn't take it well." Tommy's eyes narrowed. "So you're a criminal?" "I'm a lot of things. Criminal ain't one of them. Not anymore." "What were you before?" "Tommy, that's enough." Eleanor set a plate of food on the table. "Eat your breakfast." Tommy obeyed, but his eyes never left Caleb. Watching, judging. Rose crept downstairs next, her rag doll clutched tight. She approached Caleb slowly like a deer approaching a stream. "Are you gonna die?" she asked. "Rose?" Eleanor looked mortified, but Caleb almost smiled. "Not today, little miss. Your mama won't let me." Rose considered this. "Good. I don't like when things die." She held up her doll. "This is Abigail. She's shy." "Pleased to meet you, Abigail." Rose smiled, a tiny thing barely there, and retreated to the kitchen table. Eleanor brought Caleb a bowl of broth. "You should eat. You've had nothing but water for 2 days." He took the bowl. His hands shook so badly he nearly spilled it. Eleanor pretended not to notice. "Thank you," he said, "for all of this. I know you're taking a risk." "Wouldn't be the first time." "Your son doesn't trust me." "My son doesn't trust anyone. His father made sure of that." Caleb heard the bitterness in her voice, the old wound still bleeding beneath the surface. "What happened to him?" "Your husband." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was flat, emotionless. "Henry Sutton was the richest man in this territory. He owned half the county, including most of the town. People feared him, respected him, called him a great man." She paused. "He was also cruel, controlling, and drunk more often than sober. He hit me once early on. I told him if he ever did it again, I'd kill him in his sleep." "Did he?" "No, he found other ways to hurt me. Words, isolation, turning the children against me when he could." She looked at Caleb directly. 8 months ago, he rode out drunk in a storm. His horse came back without him. They found him at the bottom of a ravine 3 days later. And they blame you. Half the town thinks I pushed him. The other half thinks I paid someone to do it." Eleanor's laugh was bitter. "The truth is, I was home with the children that night. I heard the storm and prayed he'd make it back safe. I hated him, but he was their father." "People believe what they want to believe." "Yes, they do." Caleb set down the empty bowl. "You could have left me in the snow, saved yourself the trouble." Eleanor looked at him. Her eyes were gray-blue, the color of winter sky. Beautiful and sad. "My children found you," she said. Rose was crying. "Tommy was ready to walk into the wolves himself. What kind of mother would I be if I taught them to walk away from a dying man?" "A safer one." "Safe." Eleanor shook her head. "I stopped believing in safe the day I married Henry Sutton. All I can do now is teach my children to be good, even when the world isn't." Jed. On the fourth day, Caleb tried to stand. He made it 3 steps before his legs gave out. He caught himself on the doorframe, breathing hard sweat running down his face. Eleanor appeared beside him. "What are you doing?" "Testing. My limits." "You're going to tear your stitches." "Probably." She helped him back to the chair. Her hands were strong, calloused from work. Not the hands of a wealthy widow who'd never labored. Something had changed in this woman's life, and recently. "Your ranch hand," Caleb said. "The old man, Jeb. He doesn't like me." "Jeb doesn't like anyone new. He's been with this family 30 years. He was a slave on Henry's father's plantation before the war. And he stayed. He had nowhere else to go. Henry kept him on out of obligation, not kindness." Eleanor paused. "Jeb's loyal to me now. But he's suspicious. He's seen too many men walk through that door with pretty words and ugly intentions." "I got no pretty words." "No, you don't." Eleanor almost smiled. "That's why I'm letting you stay." That night the wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. The children had gone to bed, and Caleb sat by the fire staring at the flames. Eleanor approached with a book in her hand, leather-bound, worn from use. "Can you read?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "No." "Would you like to learn?" He looked at her. No judgment in her eyes. No pity. Just a simple offer. "Why would you teach me?" "Because everyone deserves to know what words look like on paper. My father taught me when I was 5. Said a woman who can read can never be completely powerless." "Your father sounds like a good man." "He was, before he remarried." Eleanor sat down across from him. "This was my mother's Bible. It's how I learned. It's how I taught Tommy." Caleb stared at the book. His own mother had read to him every night until she died. He'd tried to learn after picking up scraps of newspapers, asking strangers for help, but shame always stopped him. "I'm too old," he said. "Too stupid." "You're neither." Eleanor opened the book. "This letter is A. Say it." A. "Good. Now this one." They sat together by the fireheads, bent over the pages while the storm raged outside. Caleb didn't know it yet, but this was the moment everything changed. Not the rescue, not the healing. This. A woman's patient voice teaching him letters. A second chance he never asked for and didn't deserve. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled at the moon. But inside the cabin, there was only warmth. By the end of the first week, Caleb could recognize his own name. He traced the letters with his finger, C-A-L-E-B, and felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been locked away for 30 years. "You're learning fast," Eleanor said. "I have a good teacher." Their eyes met across the table. Something passed between them, a spark, a question, a warning. Eleanor looked away first. "It's late. The children should be asleep." "Eleanor." She stopped. "Thank you," Caleb said, "for believing I'm worth teaching." Eleanor stood there for a long moment, her back to him. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Everyone's worth something, Mr. Brennan. Most people just forget to look." She went upstairs without another word. Caleb sat by the fire until the embers burned low. He thought about the men hunting him. The warrant with his name on it. The blood on his hands that would never wash clean. He should leave. Tonight. Before he brought destruction to this family. But when he looked at the stairs where Eleanor had disappeared, he knew he wouldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Outside, the snow fell silent and steady, burying the world in white. The town of Silver Creek sat 12 miles east of the Sutton Ranch. On Sunday morning, old Jeb Carter drove the wagon while Eleanor and the children rode to church. Caleb stayed behind a man living under a widow's roof, had no place in respectable society. He watched them go from the barn doorway, then turned back to his work. Mending harness, fixing tools, earning his keep the only way he knew how. Around midday, hoofbeats approached. Caleb grabbed the pitchfork and moved to the barn door. 3 riders crested the hill, their horses steaming in the cold air. The lead rider was a heavy man in an expensive coat. His face was red, his eyes small and calculating. Behind him rode 2 younger men with deputy badges on their chests. The heavy man reined up and smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Well, well, you must be the vagrant I've been hearing about." Caleb said nothing. "Name's Victor Ashford. I'm the county judge, also president of the Silver Creek Bank." Ashford's smile widened. "And you, sir, are trespassing on land that will very soon belong to me. Mrs. Sutton invited me to stay. Mrs. Sutton is a widow with debts she cannot pay. This ranch is collateral on loans her late husband defaulted. In 60 days it becomes bank property." Ashford leaned forward in his saddle. "Unless, of course, she finds some other way to satisfy the debt." Caleb's grip tightened on the pitchfork. "You should leave." "I should?" Ashford laughed. "Boy, I own this county. The sheriff works for me. The judge, well, that's me too. I decide what happens here, and right now, I'm deciding to give you some friendly advice." He urged his horse closer. "Walk away. Tonight. Whatever Mrs. Sutton is paying you, or however else she's compensating you for your services, it's not worth dying for. She's not paying me anything. Then you're even more foolish than you look." Ashford straightened. 60 days, Mr. Brennan. Caleb Brennan. Something flickered in Ashford's eyes. Recognition, interest. It was gone before Caleb could identify it. "Brennan, I'll remember that." Ashford turned his horse. 60 days, gentlemen. Then this land is mine, and anyone still on it is a criminal." They rode away, kicking up snow. Caleb stood in the barn doorway long after they disappeared, his heart pounding. Ashford knew something. That flicker in his eyes, he'd recognized the name Brennan, which meant he knew about the warrant. The desertion charge. The murder that wasn't murder. Everything Caleb had been running from was about to catch up with him. And now it would catch Eleanor too. He should leave tonight, disappear before Ashford could use him against her. But as he stood there in the cold, watching the empty road, he knew he couldn't. Not because he was brave, because for the first time in 20 years, someone had looked at him like he was worth saving, and he wasn't ready to give that up. Not yet. Eleanor returned at sunset, her face tight with anger. "Jeb told me Ashford came by." She climbed down from the wagon and marched toward the cabin. "What did he say?" Caleb followed. "He said you have 60 days. Then he takes the land. He's been circling this ranch like a vulture since Henry died." Eleanor threw open the cabin door. "Henry owed him money. Gambling debts, land deals gone wrong. When Henry died, Ashford came to me with an offer." "What kind of offer?" Eleanor stopped. Her back was to him, her hands clenched at her sides. "He said I could keep the ranch, keep everything. All I had to do was marry him." Caleb felt something hot and dangerous rise in his chest. "And you said?" "I said I'd rather burn this place to the ground than share it with another man who saw me as property." She turned. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "He's been punishing me ever since, calling in debts, raising interest rates, spreading rumors in town." Her voice cracked. "They already thought I killed Henry. Now they think I'm a whore too, keeping a strange man under my roof." "I should go." The words tore out of Caleb's throat. "I'm making everything worse." "No." Eleanor stepped toward him. "You're not. Ashford was going to destroy me whether you came or not. At least now—" She stopped. "Now what?" "Now I'm not alone." They stood there in the fading light, close enough to touch but not touching. The children's voices drifted from outside, Rose laughing, Tommy scolding her for something. "I'm not a good man, Eleanor." Caleb's voice was rough. "I've done things you don't know about. I didn't ask for a good man. I asked for help. And if helping you means dying..." Eleanor met his eyes. Then you'll die doing something that matters. Isn't that better than freezing alone in the snow? Caleb had no answer. But when she reached out and took his hand just for a moment, just a brief squeeze, he knew what his answer would be. He would stay. He would fight. And if Ashford wanted this land, he'd have to take it over Caleb's dead body. Outside, the first stars appeared cold and distant, and somewhere in the timber, wolves began to howl. Mug. 2 weeks passed and Caleb grew stronger. He woke before dawn each morning, fed the horses chopped firewood, mended fences that had been neglected for years. His body protested at first, the wound in his side pulling with every swing of the axe. But he pushed through. Pain was familiar. Pain meant he was still alive. Tommy watched him constantly. The boy never said much, but his eyes followed Caleb everywhere. Suspicious, calculating, waiting for him to make a mistake. One morning, Caleb found Tommy in the barn struggling to lift a saddle onto the mare's back. The boy's arms shook with the effort, his face red with frustration. "Here." Caleb reached for the saddle. "Let me help." "I don't need your help." Tommy jerked away. "I can do it myself." "Never said you couldn't. Just offering." Tommy glared at him. The saddle slipped from his grip and fell into the hay. He kicked it hard. "Damn it." "Easy, son." "Don't call me son." Tommy's voice cracked. "You ain't my father." "No, I ain't." They stood there in the cold barn breath steaming, the mare watching them with patient eyes. "Your mama says you've been doing the man's work around here since your pa died," Caleb said quietly. "That's a heavy load for a boy your age." "I'm not a boy. I'm the man of this house." "All right. Then act like one." Tommy's head snapped up. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Means a real man knows when to accept help. Means he doesn't let pride get in the way of protecting his family." Caleb picked up the saddle and set it gently on the rail. "You want to hate me, that's fine. I've earned worse from better people. But your mama and your sister need this ranch to survive. And right now, you and me are the only ones who can make that happen." Tommy's jaw worked. His eyes were wet, though he'd die before admitting it. "My pa said never trust a stranger." "Your pa was probably right. Then why should I trust you?" Caleb considered the question. He could lie, could make promises he might not keep. But something about this boy, this fierce, frightened, too-old boy, demanded honesty. "You shouldn't," Caleb said. "Not yet. Trust is earned, not given. So watch me. Test me. And when I prove myself, you'll know. And if you don't prove yourself, then you were right not to trust me." Tommy stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached for the saddle. "Show me how to do it proper," he muttered. "The way my pa never did." Caleb showed him. That afternoon, Eleanor found them in the paddock together, Tommy riding the mare in careful circles, while Caleb called out instructions. She stood by the fence, arms wrapped around herself, watching. When Tommy finally dismounted, grinning despite himself, Eleanor caught Caleb's eye. "Thank you," she mouthed. Caleb tipped his hat and turned back to the boy. Something had shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the possibility of it. And in a world, this cold possibility was enough. The lessons continued each night by firelight. Eleanor sat beside Caleb at the table, guiding his hand as he traced letters on paper. His fingers were thick, clumsy, more suited to reins and rifle stocks than pencils. But she was patient, endlessly patient, correcting his mistakes without judgment. "Sound it out," she said. "The. What does that spell, the?" "Good. Now this one. WOLF. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Wolf. You're getting faster. Still feel like a fool." "My father couldn't read until he was 40. Eleanor turned the page. "He grew up poor, worked the docks in Boston, never had time for schooling. Then he met my mother and she taught him. He said it was like being born twice, once when he came into the world, and once when the words finally made sense." Caleb looked at her. The firelight played across her face, softening the hard edges that life had carved there. "What happened to your mother?" Fever. I was 14. Eleanor's voice was steady, but her hand trembled slightly on the book. My father remarried a year later, a woman who hated children, especially daughters. I left home at 18 to marry Henry Sutton. Jumped from one fire to another. I thought I was being rescued. Eleanor laughed, bitter and soft. A rich man, a big house, a new life in the West. I was so young, so stupid. You weren't stupid. You were desperate. There's a difference. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, recognition maybe. The shared understanding of people who'd survived things they shouldn't have. Caleb. Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. What are you running from? He should lie, should make up some story about debts or bad luck. But he was tired of lying, tired of carrying the weight alone. I killed a man, he said. Eleanor didn't flinch, didn't pull away, just waited. During the Indian Wars, I was cavalry stationed at Fort Kearney. Our commanding officer, a colonel named Whitmore, ordered us to raid a Sioux village, women and children. Eleanor, he wanted us to kill them all. His hands had started shaking. He gripped the table edge to steady them. I refused. So did a few others. But Whitmore wouldn't stand for it. He drew his pistol on a private who'd said no, a kid barely 19, and I shot him, the colonel, put a bullet through his chest before he could pull the trigger. The fire crackled. Outside wind moaned through the trees. They called it murder, Caleb continued. Said I shot a superior officer. The army put a warrant out. Said I deserted. That I was a coward and a killer. He looked at Eleanor, expecting to see horror, disgust. What he saw instead broke something inside him. She reached across the table and took his hand. You saved that boy's life. And ended another. A man who was going to murder women and children. That's not the same thing. The law don't see it that way. The law is wrong. Eleanor's grip tightened. I've known evil men, Caleb. I was married to one. You're not evil. You're just broken, like the rest of us. Caleb stared at their joined hands, his scarred, calloused, missing a finger. Hers, smaller, rougher than they should be, nails cracked from work. If Ashford finds out about the warrant, he'll use it against you, he said. Against this whole family. I should leave before... No. Eleanor's voice was fierce. You don't get to decide what risks I take. This is my home, my children, my choice. Eleanor, stay. She held his gaze. Please. The word hung in the air between them. Such a small word, such a heavy thing. Caleb didn't answer, but he didn't pull his hand away either. Upstairs, Rose woke from a nightmare. Her screams cut through the cabin like a knife high and terrified the sound of a child who'd seen too much. Eleanor was on her feet, instantly running for the loft. Caleb followed. They found Rose tangled in her blankets, thrashing, crying her eyes open, but seeing something that wasn't there. No, Papa, no, don't hurt Mama, please, please, please. Eleanor gathered her daughter in her arms, rocking her, whispering soft words. Shh, baby. It's all right. You're safe. Mama's here. Mama's got you. Tommy sat up in his bed, his face pale. He'd heard this before, many times. Rose's sobs gradually quieted. Her eyes focused on Eleanor's face, and recognition flooded in. Mama. I'm here, sweetheart. Right here. I saw Papa. He was hurting you again. It was just a dream. Papa's gone now. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Rose looked past Eleanor's shoulder and saw Caleb standing in the doorway. She went rigid. It's all right, Eleanor said quickly. That's Mr. Brennan. Remember, he's a friend. Is he going to hurt you too? The question hit Caleb like a physical blow. He knelt slowly, making himself small, non-threatening. No, little miss, he said softly. I'm never going to hurt your mama, or you, or your brother. I promise. Rose studied him with those two old eyes, eyes that had seen things no child should see. Papa promised too, she whispered. He lied. I know. Some men are liars. Caleb didn't look away. But some men keep their word. You'll have to figure out which kind I am. How? By watching. By waiting. By letting me show you. Rose was quiet for a long moment. Then she held up her rag doll. Abigail has nightmares too sometimes. Does she? She's scared of loud voices, and horses, and men who smell like whiskey. Then I'll make sure to be quiet around her, and I don't drink whiskey. Rose almost smiled. Promise? Promise. Eleanor's eyes were wet when she looked at Caleb. She mouthed something, thank you maybe, or something more, but no sound came out. Caleb nodded and stepped back from the doorway. He didn't sleep that night, just sat by the fire staring at the flames thinking about a little girl's question. Is he going to hurt you too? He'd promised he wouldn't, but promises were fragile things, easily broken, easily forgotten. His own father had promised to come back and never did. His mother had promised to live and died anyway. The world was full of broken promises. But maybe, just maybe, he could be different. Maybe he could be the kind of man who kept his word. Sunday came, and with it the trip to church. Caleb stayed behind again, but this time he watched from the window as Jeb drove the wagon down the road. Eleanor sat straight-backed on the seat, the children huddled beside her, heading into a town that hated them. She was so damn brave. He didn't deserve her kindness, didn't deserve her trust. But he wanted to. God help him, he wanted to be worthy of it. He spent the morning working on the fence line, replacing rotted posts, stringing new wire. The work was hard and cold, but it kept his mind from wandering to dark places. Around midday, he found something strange. Surveyor stakes, fresh ones driven into the frozen ground along the northern property line. Someone had been measuring Eleanor's land. Caleb pulled up one of the stakes and examined it. The wood was new, the paint still bright. This wasn't old work. Someone had been here recently, within days maybe. He gathered the stakes and carried them back to the cabin. When Eleanor returned that evening, he showed her. Her face went pale. Ashford, she breathed. He's already dividing up the land, before he even owns it. He's confident. He has every reason to be. The mortgage is due in 53 days. I don't have half the money to pay it. How much? Eleanor told him. It was a staggering sum, more than Caleb had ever seen in his life. There must be something we can do, he said. Some way to raise the money. I've tried everything. Sold the silver, the paintings, my mother's jewelry. Eleanor sank into a chair. Henry gambled away most of our fortune before he died. What's left barely covers food and supplies through winter. What about family? Anyone who could help? My sister in Boston, but we haven't spoken in 10 years. She warned me not to marry Henry. I didn't listen. Eleanor laughed hollow. Pride. It'll kill you faster than any bullet. Caleb paced the cabin thinking. There had to be an answer. Some way to save this ranch, this family, this woman who'd saved him. The railroad, he said suddenly. Eleanor looked up. What? The railroad's coming through this territory. Everyone knows it. Land prices are going to skyrocket once they announce the route. He turned to face her. What if Ashford isn't trying to collect a debt? What if he knows something about the railroad? Something that makes your land valuable? Eleanor's eyes widened. The Northern Valley. That's where the stakes were, you said. Right along the creek, flat ground, easy grade water access. Perfect for a rail line. Eleanor stood, her exhaustion suddenly forgotten. My God. Henry always said that Valley was worthless, too far from the main road, too hard to work. But if the railroad's coming through, then Ashford's not trying to punish you. He's trying to steal a fortune. They stared at each other, the implications sinking in. If we could prove it, Eleanor said slowly. If we could show that the railroad's coming and that Ashford knows, then his whole scheme falls apart. The judge can't foreclose on land that's about to be worth 10 times the debt. But how do we prove it? Ashford controls everything in this county. The sheriff, the courts, even the land office. Caleb thought of the men he'd ridden with, the contacts he'd made in darker times, names he'd hoped never to use again. "I might know someone," he said. "A man who works for the railroad. Surveyor named Jack Holloway. We rode together years ago before the war. Can you trust him? I trusted him with my life once. He didn't let me down." Eleanor stepped closer. "If Ashford finds out you're investigating him, he'll destroy you. He'll dig up the warrant, have you arrested. Let him try." "Caleb, this is my fight now too, Eleanor." He took her hands in his. "You saved my life. Let me save yours." She looked at him, really looked, and something shifted in her eyes. Fear giving way to hope. Hope giving way to something deeper. "All right," she whispered. "We fight together." Together. The word felt like a promise. That night, Caleb wrote his first letter. It took 3 hours, Eleanor guiding his hand through each word, helping him spell names he'd never seen on paper. But when he finally sealed the envelope and addressed it to Jack Holloway, care of the Union Pacific Railroad, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. He'd been running for so long. Running from the warrant, from his past, from the man he'd been, and the things he'd done. But running was just another word for dying slowly. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to stand and fight. The days grew colder. Christmas approached, though no one spoke of it. Eleanor couldn't afford gifts, and the children had learned not to expect them. But on Christmas Eve, Caleb disappeared into the barn for hours. When he emerged, he carried 2 packages wrapped in brown paper. For Tommy, a hand-carved knife handle fitted with a blade Caleb had sharpened himself. "Every man needs a good knife," he said gruffly. "Take care of it." Tommy held the gift like it was made of gold. "I will. I swear." For Rose, a wooden horse small enough to fit in her pocket, painted brown with a white star on its forehead. "To keep Abigail company," Caleb said. Rose threw her arms around his neck. Caleb froze. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had hugged him. Slowly, carefully, he put his arms around the little girl and held her. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan," she whispered. "You're welcome, little miss." Eleanor watched from the doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth. When Caleb looked up, he saw tears streaming down her face. That night, after the children were asleep, she came to him by the fire. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I wanted to." "Why?" Caleb stared at the flames. "When I was a boy, my mother used to make us gifts every Christmas. Nothing fancy, just carved animals, knitted scarves, things she made with her own hands. She said the best gifts weren't bought. They were made with love." "She sounds like a good woman." "She was the best woman I ever knew." He paused. "Until now." Eleanor sat beside him. Close. Closer than she'd ever been. "Caleb." "Eleanor." She reached up and touched his face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, the stubble he'd forgotten to shave, the scar above his eyebrow. "I told myself I'd never feel this way again," she whispered. "After Henry, after everything, I swore I'd never let another man close enough to hurt me. I won't hurt you. You might not mean to, but life hurts people, Caleb, just by being lived." He took her hand, pressed it against his chest, where his heart beat steady and strong. "Then let me take some of that hurt for you. Let me carry some of the weight." She looked at him. Her eyes were bright with tears, and something else, something that looked like hope. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me too. What if this destroys us both? What if it saves us?" She had no answer, neither did he. But when she leaned in and pressed her lips to his soft, tentative asking permission, he didn't pull away. He kissed her back, and in that moment, in the warmth of the fire, with the wind howling outside, 2 broken people found something they'd given up hoping for. A second chance. The kiss ended. They pulled apart, breathing hard, foreheads touching. "We shouldn't," Eleanor whispered. "The town already thinks..." I don't care what the town thinks. I have to care. For my children. I know. Caleb pulled back, put distance between them. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Don't apologize. Eleanor's voice was fierce. Don't you dare apologize for making me feel alive again. She stood and walked to the stairs. At the bottom, she paused. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Eleanor. She climbed the stairs and disappeared into the darkness. Caleb sat by the fire until dawn, touching his lips where she'd kissed him, wondering if he'd just made everything better or destroyed everything they'd built. Outside, the wolves howled. But for the first time in 20 years, Caleb wasn't afraid of them. He had something to fight for now, something worth living for, and God help anyone who tried to take it away. The letter came 3 weeks later. Caleb was in the barn when Jeb rode up from town, his weathered face grim. The old man handed over a creased envelope without a word, but his eyes said plenty. Whatever was inside, it wasn't good news. Caleb tore it open and read slowly, sounding out the words Eleanor had taught him. His hands shook by the time he finished. Jack Holloway was dead, killed in a surveying accident 2 weeks prior. His body found at the bottom of a ravine, his equipment scattered, his notes missing. The railroad company expressed their condolences and considered the matter closed. Caleb crumpled the letter in his fist. Bad news, Jeb asked quietly. The worst kind. That evening, Caleb told Eleanor everything. She listened in silence, her face growing paler with each word. Ashford, she said when he finished. He knew. Somehow, he knew you'd written to Holloway. The postmaster must have told him. Ashford owns half the town, probably owns him too. So now we have nothing. No proof, no witnesses, no way to stop him. Caleb paced the cabin like a caged animal. There has to be something. Holloway's notes, his surveys, they didn't just disappear. If Ashford has them, then we find them. Eleanor stared at him. You're talking about breaking into the home of a county judge. I'm talking about saving your ranch. And getting yourself killed in the process. Caleb stopped pacing. He turned to face her, his jaw set, his eyes burning with something she'd never seen before. Purpose. Determination. The look of a man who'd finally found something worth dying for. I've been running my whole life, Eleanor. Running from the army, from the warrant, from every good thing I ever had. I'm done running. Caleb. I love you. The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor's breath caught. I know I got no right to say it, Caleb continued. I'm a wanted man with nothing to my name but a broken-down horse and a Bible I can barely read. But I love you. I love your children. I love this ranch and everything it could be. He stepped closer. Let me fight for it. Let me fight for you. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers trembling. You foolish man, she whispered. Don't you know I love you too? He kissed her then. Not gentle like before, but fierce, desperate, the kiss of two people who'd found each other against impossible odds. She clung to him, and he held her, and for one perfect moment, nothing else existed. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor pressed her forehead to his chest. If you do this, if you go after Ashford, promise me you'll come back. I promise. Swear it. I swear on my mother's Bible. I'll come back to you, Eleanor Sutton. Nothing in this world or the next will stop me. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Then go. Find the proof, and bring that bastard down. Caleb left at midnight. He rode through frozen darkness, his breath steaming, his wound aching with the cold. The town of Silver Creek lay silent under a blanket of snow, windows, dark streets empty. Only the saloon showed signs of life, yellow light spilling from its windows, piano music tinkling into the night. Ashford's house sat on the hill above town, a grand Victorian structure that overlooked everything like a castle. Caleb tied his horse in a grove of pines and approached on foot, The back door was locked, but the window beside it wasn't. Caleb slipped inside and found himself in a kitchen dark and cold. He moved through the house like a ghost, checking each room, searching for anything that might be useful. The study was on the second floor. Caleb picked the lock, a skill learned in darker times, and eased the door open. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating a massive desk walls lined with books, a safe in the corner. He went to the desk first. Drawers full of papers, ledgers, correspondence. He couldn't read most of it, but he recognized the railroad company's letterhead on several documents. He stuffed them into his coat. The safe was harder. Caleb knelt before it, studying the lock. He didn't have time to crack it, and forcing it would make noise. But something caught his eye, a small key hanging from a hook behind the desk, half hidden by a curtain. Too easy, he thought. But he tried it anyway. The safe opened. Inside he found stacks of cash, a pistol, several gold coins, and a leather folder marked Confidential. Caleb pulled it out and opened it. Maps, survey notes, letters from railroad executives discussing the planned route through Montana Territory, a route that ran directly through Eleanor's northern valley, and at the bottom, a document that made Caleb's blood run cold. A warrant for his arrest. His name, his description, the charges against him, murder, desertion, treason. And attached to it, a telegram from Ashford to the U.S. Marshal's office in Helena. Have located the fugitive Caleb Brennan. Will hold him for your arrival. Request armed escort. Ashford hadn't just been investigating him. He'd been planning to turn him in, to use the warrant to destroy Eleanor's last hope. Find what you were looking for. Caleb spun. Victor Ashford stood in the doorway, a shotgun leveled at Caleb's chest. Behind him, 2 deputies with rifles. I wondered when you'd make your move, Ashford said, smiling. Took longer than I expected. You're either brave or stupid. Bit of both, I reckon. Indeed. Ashford gestured with the shotgun. Drop the papers. Step away from the safe. Caleb calculated the odds. 3 men, 3 guns, 1 door. No way out. But maybe there didn't need to be. You killed Jack Holloway, Caleb said, stalling for time. I had him killed. There's a difference. Ashford's smile widened. He was getting too curious. Asking questions about land purchases, about my dealings with the railroad. Couldn't have that. So you murdered him, like you're going to murder me. Oh no, you'll hang Mr. Brennan, legally and publicly. The Army wants you badly, something about shooting a colonel. Very messy. Ashford shook his head. But before you hang, you're going to sign a confession. You're going to admit that Eleanor Sutton hired you to kill her husband, that she's been planning to defraud the county all along. Caleb's hands clenched. She had nothing to do with Henry's death. Doesn't matter. By the time I'm done, everyone will believe she did. She'll lose everything, the ranch, her children, her freedom. And I'll finally have what should have been mine all along. Why? Caleb demanded. Why do you want to destroy her so badly? Ashford's face twisted, the pleasant mask slipping to reveal something ugly beneath. Because she said no to me. Me. Victor Ashford, the most powerful man in this territory. His voice rose. I offered her everything. Marriage, protection, a life of comfort. And she looked at me like I was dirt beneath her shoes. Like she was better than me. She is better than you. Ashford's finger tightened on the trigger. Take him. The deputies moved forward. Caleb tensed, ready to fight, knowing he'd lose, but refusing to go quietly. Then the window exploded inward. Glass shattered. A figure tumbled through old Jeb Carter, wielding a shotgun of his own. He fired once, and the deputy on the left went down screaming. Run! Jeb shouted. Caleb didn't hesitate. He grabbed the leather folder dove past Ashford and threw himself through the broken window. He hit the roof below, rolled, and tumbled into a snowbank. Gunshots crackled above, shouting. Jeb's voice bellowing curses. Caleb ran. He found his horse where he'd left it and rode hard through the darkness, the folder clutched against his chest, Jeb's sacrifice ringing in his ears. The old man had followed him. Somehow he'd known, and now he was probably dead because of it. Caleb pushed the thought away. He couldn't afford to grieve, not yet, not until Eleanor and the children were safe. He reached the ranch at dawn. Eleanor was waiting on the porch, a rifle in her hands, her face white with fear. When she saw him riding up, she dropped the gun and ran. Thank God, thank God. He dismounted and caught her in his arms. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face. Jeb, I know. He saved my life. Is he? I don't know. Caleb pulled back and held up the folder. But I got the proof. Everything. The railroad plans, the surveys, Ashford's correspondence with the company. And something else. He showed her the telegram about the warrant. Eleanor read it slowly, her face going pale. He was going to turn you in. And frame you for Henry's murder. Make you sign a confession under duress. That monster. He won't win. Caleb gripped her shoulders. We have the proof now. We just need to get it to someone who can use it, someone outside Ashford's control. The territorial governor, Eleanor said suddenly. He's in Helena. If we can get these documents to him, Ashford will have men on every road. He knows I took the papers. He'll do anything to stop us. Then we don't take the roads. They looked at each other, a plan forming between them. The mountain pass, Eleanor said. It's dangerous this time of year, but it cuts 50 miles off the journey. We could make Helena in 2 days instead of 4. You know the route? Henry used to run cattle through there. I rode it with him a dozen times. Her jaw set. I can guide us. And the children. We take them with us. I won't leave them here unprotected. Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to keep them safe out of danger, but he knew she was right. Ashford wouldn't hesitate to use Tommy and Rose as leverage. Leaving them behind would be leaving them vulnerable. All right, he said. We leave within the hour. Eleanor nodded and turned toward the cabin. Eleanor? She stopped. Whatever happens out there, I want you to know something. Caleb's voice was rough. These past weeks have been the best of my life. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. What? Hope. She crossed the distance between them and kissed him fierce and quick. Save the speeches for Helena, she said. We've got a long ride ahead. They packed quickly, food, blankets, ammunition. Tommy helped without being asked, his young face serious, understanding the gravity of what was happening. Rose clutched her wooden horse and stayed close to her mother. As they mounted up, Caleb looked back at the cabin one last time. This place had become home, the first real home he'd known in 20 years. He would fight for it, kill for it if he had to, or die trying. They rode into the mountains. The trail was brutal, narrow paths, sheer drops, snow that came up to the horses' bellies in places. Eleanor led the way, her knowledge of the terrain the only thing keeping them from riding over a cliff. By nightfall, they'd covered 20 miles. They made camp in a sheltered hollow building, a small fire that wouldn't be seen from below. Tommy and Rose fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the ride. Caleb sat watch while Eleanor rested, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of pursuit. Around midnight, she woke and came to sit beside him. You should sleep, she said. I'll take the watch. Can't sleep. Too much to think about. Eleanor pulled her blanket tighter. What happens if we make it to Helena, if the governor believes us? Ashford loses everything. His scheme gets exposed, the railroad deal falls apart, and he faces charges for Holloway's murder. And the warrant. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. I'll turn myself in, he finally said. Tell the truth about what happened at Fort Kearney. Maybe the governor can help get me a trial, a chance to explain. Or maybe they'll just hang you. Maybe. But I'm done running, Eleanor. Whatever happens, I'm done. She reached over and took his hand. If they try to take you, I'll fight. I'll tell everyone what you did, how you saved that boy, how Whitmore was going to murder innocents. Eleanor. I mean it. Her voice was fierce. You're not dying for me. Not without a fight. He squeezed her hand. I love you, Eleanor Sutton. I love you too, Caleb Brennan. Now get some sleep. I'll wake you at dawn. He wanted to argue, but exhaustion pulled at him. He lay down beside the children, his rifle close at hand, and let sleep take him. In his dreams, he saw his mother's face, smiling, proud. She'd be proud of him now, he thought. For the first time in his life, she'd be proud. The attack came at dawn. Caleb woke to the sound of gunfire, horses screaming, Rose crying out in terror. He grabbed his rifle and rolled to his feet in one motion. 6 men emerged from the tree line, firing as they came. Deputies, some of them. Others he didn't recognize, hired guns, probably men who killed for money. Get the children behind the rocks, Caleb shouted. Eleanor was already moving, dragging Tommy and Rose toward cover. Caleb fired twice, dropping one man, forcing the others to scatter. A bullet whipped past his ear. He dove behind a fallen log and returned fire, his hands steady despite the chaos. Brennan! A voice called from the trees. Ashford's voice. You can't win surrender now, and I'll let the woman and children go. Like you let Jack Holloway go, Caleb shouted back. Silence. Then Ashford laughed. Have it your way. More gunfire. More screaming. Caleb saw one of the horses go down, thrashing in the snow. The air smelled of gunpowder and blood. Tommy appeared at his side, eyes wide, but determined. Give me a gun. No. I can shoot, Pa taught me. I said no. Stay with your mother. But, now Tommy. The boy retreated. Caleb fired again, emptying his rifle, reaching for his pistol. They were outnumbered, outgunned. This was going to end badly. Then impossibly more gunfire erupted, but from the opposite direction. Caleb looked up in shock as riders poured over the ridge. A dozen men, maybe more, firing at Ashford's men. The ambushers became the ambushed, scattering in confusion. One of the riders broke away and galloped toward Caleb. As he got closer, Caleb saw his face and felt his heart stop. Jeb. The old man was bloodied, his left arm in a makeshift sling, but alive. Very much alive. Thought you could use some help, Jeb said, grinning through his pain. How? Got away from those deputies, rode to the Henderson ranch, then the Millers, then every other family Ashford's been squeezing for years. Jeb gestured at the riders. Turns out you ain't the only one sick of that bastard's games. The battle ended quickly after that. Ashford's hired guns fled or surrendered. Ashford himself tried to run, but one of the ranchers, a big man named Henderson, rode him down and dragged him back by the collar. Eleanor emerged from behind the rocks, Rose clinging to her Tommy at her side. She looked at the chaos, the bodies, the men who'd come to their rescue, and then at Caleb. Is it over? She asked. Caleb looked at Ashford sitting in the snow with his hands bound, his expensive coat torn, his face twisted with impotent rage. Almost, Caleb said. We still have to get to Helena. Henderson stepped forward. We'll ride with you. All of us. The governor's going to hear what this snake's been doing to folks around here. The other ranchers nodded in agreement. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Not of fear this time, of relief, of gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. All of you. Henderson tipped his hat. You've had enough trouble, ma'am. Time someone helped carry the load. They rode for Helena together. 15 ranchers, 1 widow, 2 children, and a wanted man carrying proof that would bring down the most powerful figure in the territory. The mountain pass was easier with so many riders. They took turns breaking trail, sharing supplies, keeping watch through the cold nights. Around the campfire on the second night, Rose fell asleep in Caleb's lap. He looked down at her small face, peaceful in sleep, and felt something crack open in his chest. He'd never thought he'd have this. A family. A future. Something to live for besides survival. Eleanor sat beside him, her head on his shoulder. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "I'm thinking I don't deserve this." "Hush. Nobody deserves anything. We just get what we get, and we make the most of it." "Is that something your father said?" "Something I learned myself. After Henry. After everything." She looked up at him. "We can't choose what happens to us, Caleb. But we can choose what we do about it." "And what do you choose?" "I choose you. Whatever comes next, I choose you." He kissed the top of her head. "I choose you too, Eleanor Sutton. Now and always." The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant, but neither of them felt the cold. They had each other, and sometimes that was enough. Helena rose from the valley like a promise. Eleanor had never seen the territorial capital before, but she'd heard stories, buildings 3 stories tall, brick streets, gas lamps that burned through the night. As their ragged group crested the final ridge, she understood why people called it the Jewel of Montana. Rose pressed against her side, eyes wide with wonder. "Mama, it's so big." "It is, sweetheart. Are there bad men here too?" Eleanor looked at Caleb riding ahead with Henderson and Jeb. His back was straight, his shoulders set with determination, but she could see the tension in every line of his body. "There are bad men everywhere, Rose, but there are good men too. We just have to find them." They entered the city as the sun climbed toward noon. People stopped to stare. 15 dust-covered ranchers, a woman with 2 children, a bound prisoner being led by rope. Whispers rippled through the crowds. Henderson guided them to the territorial courthouse, a grand stone building with columns out front. 2 guards stood at the entrance, rifles ready. "We need to see the governor," Henderson announced. "We got evidence of crimes committed by a county judge. Murder, fraud, land theft." The guards exchanged uncertain glances. "Governor Morrison doesn't see walk-ins," one of them said. "You'll need to make an appointment through his secretary." "This can't wait for an appointment." Caleb dismounted and approached the guards, his hands visible, his voice calm. "Men have died. A family's about to lose everything they own. And the man responsible is sitting right there." He pointed at Ashford. "Either you let us in, or we make enough noise that the whole territory hears about it." The guard studied Caleb's face, the hard eyes, the determination, the look of a man who'd come too far to be turned away. "Wait here." 20 minutes later, they were escorted inside. Governor James Morrison was a tall man in his 50s, gray-bearded with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened in silence as Henderson laid out the situation, the forged documents, the railroad scheme, Jack Holloway's murder, Ashford's years of corruption. When Henderson finished, Morrison turned to Eleanor. "Mrs. Sutton, is everything this man said true?" "Every word, sir." "And you have proof?" Caleb stepped forward and placed the leather folder on Morrison's desk. Railroad surveys showing the route through her land, correspondence between Ashford and company executives, financial records showing payments to Ashford for land acquisition services, and telegrams proving he knew the warrant against me, that he planned to use it to destroy Mrs. Sutton. Morrison opened the folder and began to read. His face grew darker with every page. "This is substantial," he said finally. "If authentic, it proves systematic corruption at the highest levels of Silver Creek's government." "It's authentic," Henderson said. "I know Jack Holloway's handwriting. Those are his surveys." Morrison looked at Ashford, who sat in chains between 2 guards. His expensive clothes rumpled his face, twisted with barely controlled rage. "Judge Ashford, do you have anything to say?" Ashford's laugh was ugly. "This is absurd. These people are criminals, trespassers, thieves, murderers. That man," he pointed at Caleb, "is a deserter and a killer. He shot a United States Army colonel. There's a warrant for his arrest." "I'm aware of the warrant," Morrison said quietly. "I've read it." Caleb's heart sank. "Then you know what he is." Ashford continued, his confidence growing. "A fugitive. A coward. Whatever lies he's told this woman, whatever scheme they've cooked up together, I also read the Army's internal investigation, Morrison interrupted. Ashford's smile faltered. Colonel Whitmore ordered the massacre of a civilian village, Morrison continued. Women, children, the elderly. When Private Caleb Brennan refused, Whitmore attempted to execute him. Brennan acted in self-defense and in defense of his fellow soldiers. That's not what the official record. The official record was falsified by Whitmore's friends in the War Department. Friends who are no longer in positions of power. Morrison stood. I received a full accounting of the incident 6 months ago when a group of veterans came forward with testimony. The warrant against Mr. Brennan was rescinded 2 months ago. He is no longer a wanted man. The room went silent. Eleanor felt her knees go weak. She reached for Caleb's arm to steady herself, or maybe to steady him. What? Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. The charges were dropped, Mr. Brennan. You're a free man, have been for weeks. Morrison's expression softened. I'm sorry no one informed you. The Army isn't known for its efficiency in such matters. Caleb couldn't speak. 20 years of running. 20 years of hiding of shame of believing he was a murderer. And it was over. Just like that. Eleanor's hand found his. She squeezed, hard tears streaming down her face. Caleb, she breathed, you're free. He looked at her, and something broke behind his eyes. Not grief, release. The kind of release that comes when a weight you've carried so long you forgot it was there finally lifts. This is outrageous. Ashford was on his feet, straining against his chains. You can't believe these people. They're lying, all of them. I am a judge. I am. You are under arrest, Morrison said coldly. For murder, fraud, corruption, and conspiracy to commit theft. You will be held in the territorial prison until your trial. You have no authority over me. I am the governor of Montana Territory. I have authority over everyone. Morrison nodded to the guards. Take him. Ashford screamed as they dragged him away. Threats, curses, promises of revenge. But his voice faded as the doors closed behind him, and then there was only silence. Morrison turned to Eleanor. Mrs. Sutton, you'll need to stay in Helena for the trial. We'll need your testimony and Mr. Brennan's as well. The territorial court will cover your expenses. How long? A few weeks at least, perhaps longer. Morrison's expression gentled. I know it's an inconvenience, but... It's not an inconvenience, sir. It's justice. Eleanor straightened her spine. We'll stay as long as you need us. Morrison smiled a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. I can see why Mr. Brennan fought so hard for you, ma'am. You're a remarkable woman. They were given rooms in a boarding house near the courthouse, clean, warm, with real beds and hot water. Rose bounced on the mattress, giggling. Tommy explored every corner, fascinated by the gas lamps and running water. Eleanor sat by the window watching the city below, trying to process everything that had happened. A knock at the door. She opened it to find Caleb standing in the hallway, freshly shaved, wearing clean clothes someone had given him. Can I come in? She stepped aside. He entered slowly, looking around the room like he'd never seen such luxury, which she realized he probably hadn't. The children are asleep, she said. Rose wore herself out, bouncing on the bed. She's a good girl. She is. Silence stretched between them. So much to say, neither knowing where to start. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, Caleb finally said. That this is all a dream. That I'm still in the snow dying, and none of this is real. It's real. 20 years, Eleanor. 20 years I thought I was a murderer. That I'd killed a man in cold blood, and now you know the truth. I don't know how to feel. His voice cracked. I should be happy, relieved, but I just feel empty. Like part of me died out there and never came back. Eleanor crossed the room and took his hands. You survived, Caleb. You survived things that would have destroyed most men, and you came out the other side with your honor intact. That's not nothing. I came out the other side broken. Then we'll put the pieces back together. You and me. Together." He looked at her, really looked, and she saw the man beneath the scars. The man who'd been a boy once, with a mother who loved him with dreams and hopes, and a future that stretched out bright and endless. The man who'd had all of that stolen piece by piece until there was nothing left but survival. But survival wasn't enough anymore. He wanted more. He wanted life. "Eleanor Sutton," he said softly. "Yes. When this is over, when Ashford's behind bars and your ranch is safe, will you marry me?" Her breath caught. "I know I got nothing to offer," he continued quickly. "No money, no land, no family name worth speaking. But I'll work harder than any man alive. I'll spend every day making you and those children happy. I'll—" She kissed him. Not gentle this time, not tentative. She kissed him like a woman who'd made her choice and wasn't looking back. When they finally broke apart, she was laughing and crying at the same time. "Is that a yes?" Caleb asked, dazed. "That's a yes, you foolish man, 1,000 times yes." He pulled her into his arms and held her close, his face buried in her hair, his shoulders shaking. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "None of us deserve anything. We just get what we get." She pulled back and cupped his face in her hands. "And I got you." The trial began a week later. The territorial courtroom was packed ranchers from Silver Creek who'd come to testify, Helena citizens curious about the scandal, newspaper reporters from as far away as Chicago. Ashford sat at the defendant's table in chains, his once fine clothes wrinkled, his face gray with fear. Eleanor was the first witness called. She walked to the stand with her head high, aware of every eye on her. The prosecutor, a young man named Collins, who seemed to actually believe in justice, guided her through her testimony. She told them everything. Her marriage to Henry, the abuse that controlled, the years of silent suffering, Henry's death and the accusations that followed, Ashford's campaign of harassment, his threats, his proposal, and her refusal. "And when you refused Judge Ashford's proposal," Collins asked, "what happened?" "He told me I'd regret it, that he'd take everything I had, my land, my children, my reputation." Eleanor's voice was steady. "He said no one refused Victor Ashford and got away with it." "And did he follow through on that threat?" "He forged documents claiming my husband had defaulted on loans. He spread rumors that I'd killed Henry for his money. He—" Eleanor paused, composing herself. "He tried to destroy me. In every way possible." The courtroom murmured. Collins let the moment hang. "Thank you, Mrs. Sutton. No further questions." Ashford's lawyer, a nervous man who'd been assigned by the court when no one else would take the case, rose for cross-examination. "Mrs. Sutton, isn't it true that you hated your husband?" "Yes." The lawyer blinked, surprised by her directness. "You admit it." "I have no reason to lie. Henry Sutton was cruel, controlling, and abusive. I hated him for what he did to me and my children. But I didn't kill him. He rode out drunk in a storm and fell into a ravine. 12 people saw him leave that night. But you benefited from his death. I survived his death. There's a difference." Eleanor met the lawyer's eyes without flinching. "I spent 16 years in a prison that looked like a mansion. When Henry died, I was finally free. I didn't need to kill him for that. I just needed to outlast him." The lawyer had no response. He sat down, defeated. Caleb testified next. He told them about finding the surveyor stakes, about writing to Jack Holloway, about breaking into Ashford's house and finding the evidence, about the ambush in the mountains and Jeb's rescue. When he described the telegram about his warrant, how Ashford had planned to use it to destroy Eleanor, the crowd erupted in angry murmurs. The judge had to bang his gavel for order. Then Collins asked the question everyone was waiting for. "Mr. Brennan, tell us about Colonel Whitmore." Caleb was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "We were stationed at Fort Kearney. Winter of '68. The colonel got orders to pacify a Sioux village that had been raiding supply trains. He paused. When we got there, we found old men, women, children. The warriors had left weeks before, but Whitmore didn't care. He ordered us to kill everyone. The courtroom was utterly silent. Some of the men refused. I was one of them. Whitmore pulled his pistol on a private named Danny Wells, a kid maybe 19, and said he'd shoot anyone who disobeyed. Caleb's hands clenched on the witness stand. So I shot him first. You killed a superior officer to save a fellow soldier's life. Yes. And for that you were branded a deserter and a murderer. Yes. How long did you run Mr. Brennan? 20 years, give or take. Collins nodded slowly. 20 years of hiding, of shame, of believing you were guilty of a crime you didn't commit. He turned to the jury. And all of that suffering because powerful men decided the truth was inconvenient. He looked at Ashford. Sound familiar? The defense didn't cross-examine. The ranchers testified one by one. Henderson Miller Jeb Carter, with his arm still in a sling. They told stories of Ashford's corruption, his threats, his systematic theft of land and livelihoods. By the third day, the courtroom had turned against Ashford completely. Even the reporters who'd initially seemed skeptical were writing pieces condemning him. On the fourth day, Ashford took the stand in his own defense. It was a disaster. He was arrogant, condescending, dismissive. He called the ranchers liars and thieves. He called Eleanor a whore who'd seduced Caleb into doing her bidding. He called Jack Holloway's death a tragic accident and denied any involvement. But Collins was ready. He produced letter after letter, document after document, piece after piece of evidence that contradicted everything Ashford said. By the end of the cross-examination, Ashford was red-faced and screaming, threatening Collins with destruction, promising revenge on everyone who'd testified against him. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. On the charge of murder in the first degree, the foreman announced, "We find the defendant guilty." Eleanor's hand found Caleb's and squeezed. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of corruption, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit theft, guilty. Ashford lunged to his feet screaming denials, but the guards wrestled him down. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly, finally restoring order. Victor Ashford, you have been found guilty on all counts. You are hereby sentenced to hang by the neck until dead. May God have mercy on your soul. They dragged him away, still screaming. Eleanor buried her face in Caleb's chest and wept. After the verdict, Governor Morrison summoned them to his office. Mrs. Sutton, I want you to know that your land is safe. All fraudulent claims against your property have been dismissed. You owe nothing. Thank you, Governor. There's more. Morrison opened a drawer and produced a document. The railroad has agreed to purchase right-of-way through your northern valley. The terms are generous. You'll be well compensated. Eleanor took the document, her hands shaking. The numbers at the bottom made her gasp. This is a fortune. Your husband was right about that land being valuable. He just didn't live long enough to profit from it. Morrison smiled. Ironic, isn't it? The man who tried to steal everything from you ended up making you rich. Caleb put his arm around Eleanor's shoulders. What happens now? He asked. Now you go home, Mr. Brennan. Build a life. Raise those children. Morrison extended his hand. You've earned it. Caleb shook the governor's hand. Thank you, sir, for everything. Don't thank me. Thank the men and women who had the courage to stand up against injustice. That's rarer than you might think. They left the governor's office and stepped into the sunlight. Tommy and Rose were waiting on the courthouse steps with Jeb, who'd refused to leave their side. Well, Tommy demanded, what happened? We're going home, Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. We're going home and nobody can ever take it from us again. Rose threw herself at Caleb, wrapping her arms around his legs. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" Caleb knelt down and looked into her eyes. "Yes, little miss. Forever and always." "You promise?" "I promise." Rose smiled a real smile, bright and unafraid. "Good. Because Abigail really likes you." Caleb laughed. It was a strange sound, rusty from disuse but genuine. "I really like Abigail, too." They walked through Helena together, the widow, the former fugitive, the two children who'd found a new father, and the old man who'd risked everything for them. Behind them, the courthouse stood tall and proud. Justice had been served. Ahead of them, the road stretched toward home. And for the first time in longer than any of them could remember, the future looked bright. Tommy walked beside Caleb, matching his stride. "Mr. Brennan." "Yeah, son? Are you going to marry my mama?" Caleb glanced at Eleanor, who was trying to hide her smile. "I asked her. She said yes." "Good." Tommy nodded seriously. "She deserves someone who ain't gonna hurt her." "I won't. I swear it." "I know." Tommy was quiet for a moment. "Does this mean I should call you Pa?" Caleb's throat tightened. "Only if you want to." Tommy considered this. "I'll think about it." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And right now, that was enough. The sun hung low in the western sky as they rode out of Helena. Behind them, the city glittered with gas lamps coming to life. Ahead, the mountains rose dark and silent, marking the way home. Eleanor rode beside Caleb close enough that their knees sometimes touched. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking about my mother." "What about her?" "She used to tell me that God never closes a door without opening a window. I never believed her." He looked at Eleanor, at the children at the road, stretching toward a future he'd never imagined. "I believe her now." Eleanor reached over and took his hand. "So do I." They rode on through the gathering dusk, two people who'd lost everything and found each other. Two children who'd learned that family wasn't about blood, but about love. An old man who'd proven that loyalty knew no bounds. The mountains waited ahead. Home waited ahead. And the door that had been closed for so long was finally blessedly open. Spring arrived slowly the way it always did in Montana Territory. The snow retreated up the mountainsides, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. Ice broke loose from the creek, sending chunks floating downstream toward the valley. Birds returned to the cottonwoods, filling the air with song. Eleanor stood on the porch of the cabin, watching Caleb and Tommy work on the new fence line. They moved in easy rhythm now, father and son, in everything but name-passing tools back and forth without needing to speak. 3 months had passed since Helena. 3 months since Ashford's conviction. 3 months since their world had turned right side up. Rose appeared at Eleanor's elbow, clutching a handful of wildflowers she'd picked from the meadow. "These are for the wedding, Mama." Eleanor smiled and knelt to examine the offering. Purple coneflowers, yellow buttercups, white daisies. A child's bouquet, perfect in its imperfection. "They're beautiful, sweetheart." "When is the wedding?" "Sunday. 3 more days." "Is Mr. Brennan going to be my papa then?" Eleanor brushed a strand of hair from Rose's face. "He already is in all the ways that matter. Sunday just makes it official." Rose considered this with the gravity only a 7-year-old could muster. "Will I have to call him Papa?" "Only if you want to." "Tommy calls him Pa now, sometimes." "I know." "I think I'll call him Papa." Rose nodded decisively. "Abigail says it's okay." Eleanor laughed and pulled her daughter close. Then it settled. The wedding preparations consumed the ranch. Jeb had built an arbor from willow branches, weaving them together with surprising delicacy for a man with such weathered hands. Martha Hollis, the shopkeeper from Silver Creek, had ridden out with fabric for Eleanor's dress, not white, because Eleanor wasn't a blushing bride, but a deep blue that matched her eyes. "You deserve something beautiful," Martha had said when Eleanor protested the cost. "Lord knows you've earned it." The town's attitude had shifted since the trial. People who'd whispered about Eleanor for months now nodded respectfully when she passed. Some even apologized, awkward, stumbling apologies that she accepted with more grace than they deserved. Not everyone had come around. Preacher Wells still refused to perform the ceremony, calling it an unholy union. But a traveling minister passing through Helena had agreed to make the journey, and that was enough. "You nervous?" Caleb asked that evening, sitting beside Eleanor on the porch steps. "Should I be? I don't know. I've never been married before." "Neither have I. Not really." Eleanor stared at the stars appearing one by one overhead. "What I had with Henry wasn't a marriage. It was a sentence." Caleb took her hand. His fingers were rough, calloused, missing one at the knuckle. "She loved every imperfection. This won't be like that," he said quietly. "I can't promise you riches or fancy things, but I can promise you respect, partnership, a voice in every decision we make. That's more than I ever had before. It's the least you deserve." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Tell me about our future. What do you want to know?" "Everything. Paint me a picture." Caleb was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was soft, dreaming. "I see this ranch thriving. Cattle grazing in the valley, horses in the paddock, crops growing where there's now just dirt. I see Tommy growing into a fine young man, taking over the work, when I'm too old to do it myself. I see Rose bringing home some nervous young fellow for my approval, and me terrifying him half to death before I shake his hand." Eleanor laughed. "What else? I see us sitting on this porch 50 years from now, gray-haired, wrinkled, surrounded by grandchildren, still holding hands, still talking under the stars." His voice caught. "I see a life, Eleanor, a real one, the kind I never thought I'd have." She lifted her head and kissed him softly. "I see it too." The night before the wedding, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She sat by the window of her bedroom looking out at the moonlit landscape. So much had changed in such a short time. 6 months ago, she'd pressed a pistol to her temple and prayed for the courage to pull the trigger. Now she was about to marry a man she loved with children who were healing on land that belonged to her free and clear. A soft knock at the door. "Come in." Tommy entered, still dressed, his face troubled. He closed the door behind him and stood there, uncertain. "Couldn't sleep either?" Eleanor asked. "No, ma'am." "Sit with me." He crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed, not quite meeting her eyes. "What's troubling you, son?" Tommy was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Do you think Pa would be angry, my real Pa, I mean, about you marrying Mr. Brennan?" Eleanor's heart ached. Even after everything Henry had done, Tommy still wrestled with loyalty to his father's memory. Children were like that, capable of love, even when love wasn't deserved. "Your father wasn't an easy man to live with," she said carefully. "He did things that hurt all of us, but I believe deep down he wanted you and Rose to be happy. You think he'd want you to marry someone else? I think he'd want me to stop being sad. I think he'd want you to have a father who teaches you things and shows up when he says he will." Eleanor reached out and took Tommy's hand. "Mr. Brennan isn't replacing your father, Tommy. He's filling a space that's been empty for too long." Tommy's jaw worked. His eyes were wet. "I called him Pa yesterday. By accident." "How did it feel?" "Scary. Good." He looked at her finally. "Is that okay?" "It's more than okay. It's wonderful." Tommy broke, then tears streaming down his face, 11 years of grief and confusion finally finding release. Eleanor gathered him in her arms and held him tight, rocking him like she had when he was small. "I miss him sometimes," Tommy sobbed. "Even though he was mean, even though he scared me, I miss him." "I know, baby. I know. Does that make me bad?" "It makes you human." Eleanor kissed the top of his head. You can miss someone and still be glad they're gone. You can love someone and still know they hurt you. Feelings don't follow rules. They sat together until Tommy's tears dried, until his breathing steadied, until the weight he'd been carrying finally started to lift. "Mr. Brennan, Pa, he won't leave, will he?" Tommy asked. "He won't ride off one night and not come back." "No, son, he won't." "How do you know?" "Because he's not your father. He's not any of the men who came before." Eleanor cupped her son's face in her hands. "He's the man who came back. Even when leaving would have been easier. Even when staying meant risking everything. That's not the kind of man who runs." Tommy nodded slowly. "Okay. Okay. Yeah." He almost smiled. "Okay." The wedding day dawned clear and warm. The entire territory seemed to have turned out ranchers from Silver Creek, shopkeepers from Helena, even a few strangers who'd heard the story and wanted to see its happy ending. Eleanor stood in her bedroom, Martha Hollis helping with the final buttons on her blue dress. Her hands were shaking. "Nervous?" Martha asked. "Terrified." "That's normal. I shook like a leaf on my wedding day. My mother had to practically carry me to the altar." "What if something goes wrong?" "Something always goes wrong. That's what makes it memorable." Martha finished the last button and stepped back to admire her work. "You look beautiful, Eleanor. Like a woman who's finally found her way home." Eleanor looked at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because she'd changed physically, the same dark hair, the same gray-blue eyes, but because something in her expression had shifted. The fear was gone. The wariness, the constant bracing for pain. She looked like someone who expected good things to happen. "Ready?" Martha asked. "Yes." Eleanor straightened her shoulders. "I'm ready." Caleb stood beneath the willow arbor, wearing a new suit that Henderson had insisted on buying him as a wedding gift. It didn't quite fit too tight in the shoulders, too loose in the waist, but he'd never owned anything so fine. Jeb stood beside him, as best man cleaned up and solemn, his injured arm finally out of its sling. Tommy and Rose waited in the front row, their faces scrubbed, their clothes pressed. The minister, a kind-faced man named Reverend Parker, smiled reassuringly. "Deep breath, son. She's not going to run." "How do you know?" "Because a woman who survived what she's survived doesn't scare easy." The music started. An old hymn played on a fiddle by one of the ranchers, and everyone turned to look. Eleanor appeared at the end of the aisle, walking alone because there was no one left to give her away. She didn't need anyone to give her away. She was giving herself freely and completely to the man waiting at the altar. Caleb forgot how to breathe. She was beautiful. Not just in the dress, not just in the way the morning light caught her hair. Beautiful in the way she moved, confident and sure. Beautiful in the tears already streaming down her face. Beautiful in the smile she couldn't contain. She reached the arbor and took his hands. Her fingers were cold despite the warm day. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi. You look handsome." "You look like a dream." Reverend Parker cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony was simple. Traditional vows spoken with voices that trembled. Rings exchanged, plain gold bands Caleb had bought with his first honest wages in 20 years. When Parker asked if anyone objected to the union, Caleb tensed, half expecting someone to rise with accusations or condemnations. But the crowd remained silent, and Parker smiled. "Then by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife." He looked at Caleb. "You may kiss your bride." Caleb cupped Eleanor's face in his hands and kissed her tender, reverent. The kiss of a man who'd finally found what he'd been searching for his whole life. The crowd erupted in applause. Rose broke free from her seat and threw herself at them, wrapping her arms around both their legs. Tommy followed more slowly, but he was smiling, and when Caleb extended a hand, Tommy took it. "Congratulations, Pa," Tommy said. Caleb's heart cracked wide open. "Thank you, son." They stood there beneath the arbor, husband and wife, father and children, while the crowd cheered and the sun climbed higher and the future stretched out before them bright and full of promise. This, Caleb thought. This is what I was fighting for. This is what I almost died for. This is everything. The reception lasted well into the evening. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food brought by neighbors and well-wishers. Henderson had supplied a barrel of cider. Martha had baked a 3-tier cake. Even Sheriff Reed from Silver Creek had come looking uncomfortable, but determined to make amends. "I should have stopped Ashford years ago," he told Eleanor privately. "I was a coward. I let fear make me complicit." "You're here now," Eleanor said. "That counts for something." "Does it?" "It's a start." As darkness fell and lanterns were lit, the fiddle player struck up a dance tune. Caleb took Eleanor's hand and led her to the open space that served as a dance floor. "I should warn you," he said, "I don't really know how to dance." "Neither do I." "Then we'll figure it out together." They swayed more than danced, holding each other close while the music played and the stars emerged overhead. Other couples joined them. Henderson and his wife Martha, with a widower from Helena, even Jeb, with Rose, standing on his feet. "Happy," Caleb murmured against Eleanor's hair. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Me too." "Is this real?" "Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find myself back in that cabin alone with Henry's debts and the town's hatred and nothing to look forward to." Caleb pulled back to look at her face. "It's real. I'm real. This—" He gestured at the celebration around them, at their children, laughing at their friends and neighbors who'd become family. "All of this is real, and it's ours." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I love you, Caleb Brennan." "I love you too, Eleanor Brennan." She laughed at the sound of her new name. "Eleanor Brennan, I like that." "Better get used to it. You'll be wearing it for a long time." "Promise. Promise." They danced until the music stopped, until the guests departed with well wishes and promises to visit, until Tommy carried a sleeping Rose inside, and Jeb retreated to his quarters in the barn. Then they stood alone on the porch, the same porch where Eleanor had once held a pistol to her head, the same porch where Caleb had sworn to fight for her. "This is where it started," Eleanor said softly. "This is where Tommy ran in and told me about the man in the snow. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you'd left me there." "Don't." "Why?" "Because it doesn't matter. You're here now. We're here now. That's all that counts." Caleb wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about all the things I almost missed. This ranch. These children. You." She leaned back against him. "I'm thinking about how close I came to giving up." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." She turned in his arms to face him. "Do you believe in fate?" "I believe in choices. You chose to save me. I chose to stay. Everything else followed from that. So it wasn't fate that brought you to my fence line half dead and bleeding." "Maybe it was." Caleb smiled. "Or maybe God just has a strange sense of humor." Eleanor laughed and kissed him. "Come inside, husband. It's getting cold." "Yes, ma'am." They walked into the cabin together, closing the door on the darkness, opening a new chapter of their lives. 6 months later, the railroad came through. The tracks cut across the northern valley exactly as the surveys had predicted, bringing jobs and commerce and prosperity to a territory that had been dying. The compensation Eleanor received was more than enough to pay off any remaining debts and set aside money for Tommy and Rose's futures. Caleb used part of it to build a proper house, 2 stories with room for the family to grow, with a porch that wrapped all the way around. They kept the old cabin too, converting it to a bunkhouse for the ranch hands they'd hired. On the day they moved into the new house, Caleb carried Eleanor across the threshold, while Tommy made gagging sounds and Rose giggled. "Welcome home, Mrs. Brennan." "I've been home for months, Mr. Brennan. This is just a different building." He set her down and kissed her forehead. "I love you." "I know. You tell me every day." "And I'll keep telling you. Every day for the rest of my life." Word came in autumn that Victor Ashford had been hanged. Eleanor received the news with no satisfaction, only relief that a dark chapter had finally closed. "Do you think about him?" Caleb asked. "What he tried to do?" "Sometimes, but not the way you'd think." Eleanor set down the letter and looked out the window at her children playing in the yard. "I think about how different things could have been. If you hadn't come. If the ranchers hadn't helped. If Governor Morrison had been as corrupt as everyone else. But those things didn't happen." "No, they didn't." She turned to face him. "That's the thing about life, isn't it? It could always go wrong. There's always someone trying to take what you have to break what you've built. But sometimes if you're lucky, if you're brave, if you refuse to give up, sometimes it goes right." Is that what we are? Lucky. Lucky. Blessed. Stubborn as hell. Eleanor smiled. All of the above. Winter came again, gentler than the last. On Christmas Eve, the family gathered in the parlor of their new home. A fire crackled in the hearth. A tree stood in the corner, decorated with ribbons and candles. Presents were piled beneath it. Real presents this year, not just carved toys and mended clothes. Tommy sat by the fire reading aloud from a book of adventure stories. At 13 now, he'd grown tall and serious with his mother's eyes and a steadiness that came from surviving things no child should face. Rose curled up beside Caleb on the settee, her wooden horse clutched in one hand, her new porcelain doll in the other. She'd started calling him Papa months ago, and the word still made his heart swell every time he heard it. Eleanor sat in her rocking chair knitting a blanket for the baby that would arrive in spring. She hadn't told the children yet, wanted to wait until Christmas morning, make it part of the celebration. Jeb dozed in the corner, his white hair gleaming in the firelight. He was part of the family now, officially and completely. He'd refused all offers to move into the main house, insisting the bunkhouse was fine. But he ate every meal with them, and was always the first one the children ran to with their troubles. "Ma." Tommy looked up from his book. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever miss the old life? Before Pa came, I mean. Before everything changed?" Eleanor set down her knitting. "What makes you ask that?" "I don't know. I was just thinking about how different everything is now. Sometimes I barely remember what it was like before." "Is that bad?" "I don't think so. It's just strange. Like I was a different person." "You were a different person." Eleanor reached over and squeezed his hand. "We all were. That's what surviving does, it changes you. Sometimes for worse. Sometimes for better." "Which is it for us?" "Better. Definitely better." Tommy smiled, a rare sight these days, as he grew into the serious young man he was becoming. "Yeah, I think so too." Later, after the children were asleep and Jeb had retired to his quarters, Eleanor and Caleb sat together on the porch. Snow was falling soft and silent, blanketing the world in white. "Can you believe it's been a year?" Eleanor asked. "No, and yes. It feels like everything and nothing at the same time." "I know what you mean." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall, listening to the wind whisper through the pines. "I was dying when you found me," Caleb said finally. "Not just in body, in spirit. I'd given up on everything, on life, on hope, on ever being anything more than a wanted man with a borrowed horse. And now I'm a husband, a father, a rancher." He shook his head in wonder. "I'm a man with a future. I didn't think that was possible anymore." Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. "My children saved you first. I just finished the job. Your children brought me to the door. You opened it. And you walked through. I couldn't help it. You were standing on the other side." She lifted her head and kissed him slow and sweet. "Merry Christmas, Caleb." "Merry Christmas, Eleanor." They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside, then climbed the stairs to their bedroom, to the life they'd built together, to the future that waited for them with open arms. Outside, the snow continued to fall. The mountains stood sentinel in the darkness. The wolves howled somewhere in the timber, but their song didn't sound threatening anymore. It sounded like music, like home. In the end, it wasn't about the money or the land or the railroad. It wasn't about defeating villains or winning trials or proving the town wrong. It was about two broken people who found each other in the snow, who chose each other when choosing was hard, who built something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. Eleanor had started the winter with a gun in her hand and nothing left to live for. She ended it with a husband who loved her children, who were healing, and a baby growing inside her. Caleb had started the winter dying in a snowdrift, convinced he deserved nothing better. He ended it with a family, a home, and a name that wasn't whispered in shame anymore. Some people said it was luck. Others called it fate. A few even called it a miracle. But Eleanor and Caleb knew the truth. It was love. Not the easy kind that comes and goes with the seasons. The hard kind. The kind that demands everything you have and gives back even more. The kind that looks at broken pieces and sees something worth saving. They'd found it against all odds in the worst winter of their lives on a ranch at the edge of nowhere. And they would keep it guard, it nurture it, fight for it for as long as they both lived. Because that's what love was. Not a feeling, a choice, made every day, in every moment, through every storm. And they chose each other. Always. Forever.